Dr. Ali, you invited me to put you under a microscope for today's MNN television segment. Did you mean I should ask you specific questions about what you do to prevent a viral infection?
Yes. I was thinking how, Richard, you and I could make this program more useful to our viewers. And I thought one of the effective way might be if you ask me specific, pointed, direct questions about what I do myself. We did not close our practice in this pandemic. And we've had 18 patients who did have coronavirus. And fortunately, they had learned from us things before they got infected. So they already were familiar with it. So I can tell you with humility that none of our patients needed to go to hospital. Even though I told them that if you have unusual difficulty with breathing, like deep-seated suffocation, please go to the nearest hospital. We don't want to take any chances. And I told them that you have to stay in touch with your primary physician. I'm not your primary physician. Your primary physician is hooked up with the other systems, support systems, the city systems, the state systems. So this is a serious issue, and we should take it seriously.
So that leads me to another question. What would you yourself do to prepare yourself to fight off the COVID-19 virus if you were infected?
Okay, I would want to do everything that I can do to keep my organs in the body well oxygenated, because I know that virus does not survive where there is good level of oxygen. Virus only thrives where there is a high level of acids and very low or no oxygen. So my scheme would be very simple. I would try every which way. For example, I know that doing hydrogen peroxide foot soaks, it doesn't cost me anything with the 3% hydrogen peroxide. People can get all this information from my website, aliacademy.org. So I know that is a very inexpensive, very pleasant way of, I could be listening to music on television or some other, I could be reading a good book of spiritual saying. But my mind would go to how many ways can I get more oxygen in my body? It so turns out, based on our extensive, very, very good sound studies, that it is when you slow down the process of breathing out that you get more time, give more time to oxygen in the lungs to get into the blood, and then from blood to the brain and to the heart and the kidneys. So, and then the other thing is, you can also do 3% hydrogen peroxide packs. Let's say you have ankle swelling. That's because the circulation is poor, okay? Or let's say somebody has high blood pressure and they see their ankle and the lower legs, there is edema there. Well, take a towel and soak it with 3% hydrogen peroxide. 1 part hydrogen peroxide, start with 50 parts of ordinary water. And just wrap your ankle and the legs around it, okay? Richard, we have to find a way that we are not afflicted by the primary threat of our time, pandemic, which is panic, which is fear, which saps all our energy out, which creates doubt about the trustworthiness of the information that we are getting. Okay, I'll give you a specific example. I have seen a march of doctors coming on radio and television shows and giving their information. They all talk about the numbers of positive tests and the numbers of fatalities, and they talk about bending the curve, etc. I have not heard any one of them tell on the radio or the television what their patient, first of all, this thing, that what I said is the biologic truth, that infecting organisms do well when the tissues are depleted of oxygen and when they are loaded with acids. So then if armed with this knowledge, they can then learn, how can I make sure that I'm not constipated? How can I sure that I'm not dehydrated? Dehydrated, drink more water, for God's sake. The bowel movement, if you miss your bowel movement, you know there are softeners without prescription. Psyllium is my all-time recommended. That's a P for Peter, Syllium. There's a particular brand which comes from an Indian city called Sidhpur. And almost all Indian and Pakistani stores in New York metropolitan area who sell groceries, etc., miscellaneous items, they will carry this psyllium. This is far better than the American Metamucil. I never prescribe American Metamucil. I just ask them, make an effort, just use the telephone and find out where is the nearest place where they sell Indian groceries or Indian items, clothing
And it's
items
probably
or.
one of those items you can get online very easily.
Right.
Yeah.
So my point is, we focus on those things that we can do for ourselves without the stress of spending extra money, without being rushed into. It is general information now that mortality of ventilators in the hospital, which initially was reported to be in the range of 80 to 85, there are some reports which are saying up to 90% of the people who went on ventilators did not survive. So we have a strong incentive to get our oxygen some other way. Okay. One peculiar thing about coronavirus is that coronavirus is called corona because it has spikes on its surface. The spikes it uses to dig into the delicate underlining of the inside of the air spaces in the lungs, okay, lung spaces. They're called alveoli. Nature has created a protein. I suppose you could say that nature also wanted to help these viruses to survive. Nature wanted us to survive, so it gave us a lot of mechanism. But it also gave this coronaviruses a peculiar advantage because they use that protein which is normally present in our lung spaces. It's called ACE, is an enzyme people know. And so virus uses this protein as a docking site. And the protein is on the inside of these air spaces in the lungs. That's why this virus has a greater tendency to lead to pneumonia and also atypical types of pneumonia. And of course, sometimes people lose their sense of smell and lesser sense of taste. So that also helps the diagnosis. But the best way is not to delay tests for coronavirus test. Okay. The lady who cleans our office asked me if as a favor to her, I can order a corona test for her. So I know that I should register her and this and that. But she's like my aunt. So I said, okay. So we gave her a script, she had the test. She came to me. The test was positive. I said to her, the test is positive for the antibody test. And that is probably a good thing. It means that you've been exposed to the virus, that your immune system is not agnostic to the virus anymore. It recognized it, it responded to it, it produced an antibody. So then, armed with this knowledge, she was secure that at least she has some level of security. Now, every bit of security, for example, this conversation, Richard, that you and I are having, I assume that if some people are listening and they're saying, the doctor, he wants to share what he does exactly himself. And so I talked about, let me spend a minute on breakfast. That's a crucial thing to keep your acids down. Because when you have sugar and you have starches, you get more insulin, and that adds to the problem of acid burden on all cells in the bodies. So my breakfast is I use a smoothie. I prepare it myself. Because I use lecithin and a protein powder and flaxseed, which is just crushed, not grounded, I can prepare my smoothie literally in 1.5 minutes because I've timed myself. Then it takes me, let's say, I take vegetable juice as a fluid. It takes me about 2 or 3 minutes to, in portions, drink it up. If there is only one thing that our viewers want to get from me, please, please, please try it. It's a smoothie that you will make in your own kitchen. It needs an organic vegetable juice. You can go and buy it from a suitable place. buy it in bulk, so it'll be cheaper. Lecithin comes from a soy, it's a natural product. It's actually quite inexpensive. The other day, I was very surprised. I picked up two large boxes of lecithin for about $4. I couldn't believe it. This could be that cheap.
Nothing
And that
costs
was
$4.
it's probably 12 ounces, table that I had. So that is, it's lecithin, it's flaxseed, grounded flaxseed. You can grind it, but then you have to clean the grinder. So you can take crushed it, you can buy, that's called flaxseed meal. Okay. Now, if you want to, you could put a tablespoon of, let's say, almond oil, my all-time favorite oil. And since I want to say what I do, I have on my kitchen counter some oils. Almond oil, that was my father's favorite. He used to give it to me when I was a boy. I have coconut oil. I have avocado oil. I have hazelnut oil because I like the flavor. I have pistachio oil because I like the flavor. But I also have a good quality extra virgin olive oil and also sesame oil. So I would suggest that if you're going to take olive oil or sesame oil, buy the brand which is light in color. When they're dark in color, they have been heated and processed. So the healthiest oils are the ones which are closest to the natural state. Okay. So then I would put that sometimes in my smoothie. Take a tablespoon, take 2 tablespoons. Richard, I don't want to be caught up in an obsessive thing that this is this and constantly think about it. I want to be like my grandfather, my grandmother, whatever was in the kitchen, we helped ourselves to it. It's a light heart. I'm not thinking about the virus. It's all the material. I've been doing it for about 15, 20 years. Okay. Richard, I will share one thing with you, which some people would like. I have, in the last 50 years, I've been a student of medicine for 62 years. Okay. For last 50 years, I have never declined a food because I was concerned about my weight. Because if you go into this, I describe the morning recipe for that smoothie. Now I want to give a little tip for people who have diabetes. Let's say people have diabetes whose morning blood sugar tends to be very high. And this is very frustrating because they keep adding more and more medications and it's not coming down. You prepare the smoothie. Let's say you need about 12 ounces of your smoothie as for breakfast, which I do. You make an extra 8 ounces. Take 4, put them in the refrigerator. Take 4 ounces at the lunchtime, 4 ounces at the dinner time. See the miracle next time of your own blood sugar. Your blood sugar, let's say if it used to be 130, which would distress you, it's going to come down to 70. So these are the simple things that I have an advantage. There's a gentleman, he parks my car in the parking lot, and we have become friends because he's interested in natural therapies. And his mother knows a lot about natural therapies. Like our friend Mark, his mother knows a lot about that stuff. So he started asking me questions about this COVID virus. And so I was giving him some answers, just as a friendly conversation. So after 2 or 3 days, I saw him and he's my friend. And it's nice to have a friend in the parking lot. So I said, how's your family? He said, my wife she turned COVID positive. I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear about that. He said, no, I know so many things that I can squeeze and juice them. And I know so many things I can boil them and make a tea out of them. I said, can you name 2 things? Ginger is my all-time favorite, but I like turmeric. He said, both are excellent. Then he talked about leaf of life and something from Jamaica. And he said, my wife, when she turned, she had a little cold. We did the test. The test became positive. So I gave her everything that I could think about, I could use. Of course, he is a very experienced person in doing this. And also teas. And 2 days later, her breathing was normal. She didn't have any shortness of breath. And then 3 days later, she's completely back to normal. And then he said something else happened. My niece, who lives in Queens, in New York, called me. She said, you know, Uncle Joe, I'm very sick, and my friends have COVID. So they said I should go to the hospital. So I said, what did you tell her? He said, I told her, no, don't go to the hospital. I'm coming. We are going to use our own things. Richard, we have coexisted with viruses for eons, for thousands and thousands of years. How is it possible that our ancestors would not have found that there are certain spices, there are certain, herbs, there are certain parts of a plant? How would is it that they would not have figured that out? That if we panic, we have to find to get together. Richard, I tell my patients that the most precious gift that anybody can give to anybody else is a gift of the presence. So our ancestors knew, living in in nomadic style, someplace in deserts in Africa or Australia or wherever, but they understood these things, that just the presence of a person for a person who is not feeling well is healing. I'm sure that that's how they developed our consciousness. I believe that had a lot to evolution of human consciousness. I believe had a lot to do with this discovery that presence is the most precious gift that we can give to anyone. So though they capitalized on this, so rather than feel isolated, now we are very angry because our children are home and we are isolated. And now we are saying the suicide rate is going up, and we are saying the drug abuse is going up, and we are just angry with ourselves. Those concerns are very valid. My point is, can't we have a little balancing act? Can't we remember what our ancestors used to do? Why are we so panicking about it?
I've heard much. What you seem to be talking about is a strong immune system, and I've been hearing about weakness of immune system, immune weakness, people who get infected with the virus. What do they precisely mean by those weaknesses?
Richard, you've asked me a wonderful question, and you are giving me an opportunity to visit my favorite subject.
Okay.
No, I don't want to be critical of everyone, so I hope the viewers will take my comments in the sense and the spirit that I'm going to offer. The next time you see a doctor or a virology specialist who is talking about the radio or the television and uses the word immune system, we should ask them, would you please translate the word immune system? First, tell us, what does it mean to you? And then tell us, what do you expect to get from us? Remember, I spoke so much about breathing and oxygen. I spoke so much about the water. Everybody knows what oxygen is. Everybody knows what breathing is. Everybody knows what the lungs is. Everybody knows what constipation is. Everybody knows what bloating is. Everybody knows what a heartburn is. When they use the word immune system, they are deepening the ignorance of people. Because if you ask them, take about 10 minutes and define for my viewers and my audience, what is immune system? You can get actually professors, see what they do, what they talk about it. They will talk about their lymphocytes, their T lymphocytes, their B lymphocytes. That is nonsense. In fact, if you asked me to come to your program and invited a professor of immunology, I would ask him, I have also written books about immunology, but we are not going to talk about that. I want to ask you a simple question. When you were in first year, did you learn how oxygen-driven catalysts break down the food that you eat to produce that energy? Did you also learn that there are cells in the body which will eat up the bacteria or the viruses, but they need energy to do that? Did you learn in school that for those cells that we call immune cells or antibody-making cells, they are energetic beings and they need their own energy? If your energy systems are disrupted because your oxygen systems are clogged up, your insulin system is clogged up, your liver is clogged up with fat, don't talk to me about your immune system, because this is an empty word that you yourself don't understand it. And so you trying to tell me the immune system, talk to me about, you would talk to your patients, or you would talk on the radio to the general public. Talk to them and talk to me in the way that they can understand from you what they should do. I have spoken about my smoothie breakfast, which I make myself. I have spoken about my own breathing. I actually have said, probably repeated myself, I do not want to be called dehydrated. Dehydrated means my body is very acidic. My tissues are loaded with acid. And the coronaviruses, they have a deep sense for what tissues are loaded with acids and what tissues are depleted with oxygen. Rather than saying our underlying conditions are diabetes and asthma and immune inflammatory disorders and rheumatoid arthritis, why don't our experts tell us what they do themselves? I'm so happy you asked me this question, Richard,
So
because
tell
this
us what
question
you
brings me
do.
to life.
Tell us what you do.
What I do. So this is what I do. And you ask them when they come on the radio and they talk about their superior wisdom of immune system, what is it that you do for your immune system? Okay. They will hem and haw because they don't study insulin, because they don't do ordered insulin test for their patient. Richard, tell me something. I won't ask you for your age. We are very close friends. So I one time ordered insulin test for you. Other than that, did anybody ever, any doctor ever told you that you should have an insulin test to find out the metabolic status, the energetic status of your body?
Never have.
All your cells, I knew that. All our cells, the bug eating cells, are our cells. We have flu fighters in our body, billions of them. Okay? We can call them lymphocyte T cell or B cell. I prefer to call them flu fighters. I want to engage and strengthen my own flu fighters under my own skin so I can coexist with coronaviruses healthfully.
So let me
So
ask
it's
you
very
this.
simple.
Let me ask you this, see if I understand this right. If your immune system is weak, you don't have those fighters. Those fighters aren't ready to fight the flu, correct?
They are very weak because they need energy to move.
Mm-hmm. So are
You see,
there...
every cell, Richard, this is such a basic stuff that we get surprised, we feel funny or we feel surprised at it. Every cell in an animal or a human being or a plant is a living entity, is a living being, and all living beings need energy. So our flu fighter cells cannot fight if they don't have energy.
Mm-hmm.
If our liver is all clogged up with stagnant fat, our liver makes a lot of enzymes. Enzymes are the catalysts. They make things happen they're workhorses of the human body. So when somebody is loaded with fat, now if you have a high insulin, that your probability of fatty disease of the liver goes up like just like that, straight up. Now you can get an ultrasound of the liver, and the radiologist will tell you that your liver is enlarged, it's clogged up with fat, it's not working. Now a clogged up liver is not manufacturing those enzymes, the catalysts, which react with each other to release energy. After all, when you, let's say, if you have an orange, okay, and so there is an orange juice, and there is sugar there, and the system, the enzymes will break down the sugar to release energy. The energetic currency of the human body is a substance called ATP. Every medical student, every nursing student is taught this in the first courses of their thing. So nobody should be very surprised. I never heard a doctor talk once since COVID started and use the word ATP. I never heard one of them to say use the word mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cells. You see, we have to think energetically to develop knowledge for it and a passion for it. And then we take the next step. How am I going to strengthen my mitochondria so I have sufficient energy so my flu fighting cells can use it to fight off the flu virus? After all, I'm 80 years old. I have lived with seasonal flu all my life. I think that if, let's do a thought experiment. Let's say that when the news came that this is a bad player from Italy, and once we knew that Chinese had crossbred the viruses to create a novel virus that is deliberate, I don't want to talk about what their motives were, okay? But I am convinced because I have directly heard Chinese scientists, and I know enough about biology and virology that I could listen to them closely and believe that they are telling me the truth. Also, later on, I found out they're published in two journals that I like. One is Nature, one is Lancet. So I knew that I have published in both. So I'm familiar with what Lancet does, what Nature does. And so when I found out that this scientist, she was actually a woman scientist from China, she had escaped China into America. That's how we got the opportunity. If they had at that time invited practitioners to serve as consultants to our governors, our congresspeople, our president, our secretaries. But the criteria is that you have to have practiced these natural arts for at least 3 years before you say, I will be willing to serve. Now, some of them would be 30 years into natural medicine. And some of them, probably like me, would be people who would be certified surgeons or certified pathologists. You know, I am both certified surgeon and certified pathologist, okay? And many of them have served on the teaching faculty of universities. If there was a group of, let's say, 30 doctors, their names were sent to the Department of Health and to, let's say, White House. We think that these doctors are suitable to give you better advice how to deal with pandemic, what to inform the patients to create hope, sustain the hope with knowledge and authenticity, not with cheap thrills. And rather than talk about ventilators, let's talk about God gave us two ventilators, each one of us, each lung is a ventilator. And God gave us control on our lungs. So I am not trying to be somebody who is idealistic or is, full of himself. You asked me, you want to put me under a microscope. I like that idea. You are putting me in my microscope, and I am using this opportunity to reach people. I am telling you, I posed this question to Jonathan Cullen, who is the editor of the journal Townsend Letter. That is the most read journal of integrative natural medicine in the whole world. I said, Jonathan, if you had received a call from White House or the Department of Health that we are looking for doctors who are experienced in indigenous therapies as well as the Western medicine, because Western medicine is more needed in acute care. The prevention and if we want to coexist with them healthfully, that is the domain of integrative doctors. That's the domain of nutritionists. That's the domain of herbalists. That's the domain of spicists. I made a word one time. Somebody who practices spice medicine, let's call him spiceologist. Okay. And I declared myself the first self-appointed spiceologist of the whole world. Richard, I am making a point. You put me under a microscope. For coping with extraordinary challenges, we need people with extraordinary passion. Mm-hmm. We need people with extraordinary skills. You don't take people who are dying of flu and give them to drug doctors who have never known anything what to do with it. We know there are no drugs against flu. We haven't had any effective drugs against flu. Mm-hmm. And I have my doubts. I hope I'm proven wrong. I also told you there are wonderful vaccinations. I'm not against vaccination. I just want to know which vaccine does what and how effective they are.
So let me ask you this at this point. You mentioned spices and herbs. Now, which spices do you prefer because of their clinical, preventative, and therapeutic qualities?
Thank you for asking me this question. The two that I take regularly myself are turmeric. I take it with vitamin C. To be precise, I take about half a teaspoon of turmeric powder, and I take 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C in a sublingual form. It gets dissolved easily and it gets absorbed easily. I am very rigid. The breakfast smoothie that I mentioned, that is a religion to me. Okay. I wake up with the first image of my father and offer a prayer, and my mom offer a prayer. And then I know that I have to prepare my smoothie. I never miss it. Now I look at the turmeric and vitamin C again as a part of my ritual. Okay, I don't want to miss that. The next one that I like is the ginger recipes. Ginger recipes are very good. Whether you make a ginger broth, bone broth, you take chicken and have the butcher cut the bones, the soft bones, so you cut it into pieces. It releases their bone marrow. Or you can buy marrow from the store and you can add marrow. But marrow is especially rich in, marrow represents a reserve that nature has built in our bones to serve us in the moments of crisis, when we have a hemorrhage after an automobile accident, or a woman has a heavy period or whatever, or when we have an infection and we need something to fight off, something like, let's say, coronavirus. So I focus very heavily on ginger. You can take a ginger capsule also, they are available. Ginger tea is very easy to make. Ginger water, I think, is one of the best waters for people who have difficulty finding good water. You can take 2-3 inches of ginger root and boil it with water. Let's say you take 2 liters of water, boil it for 5 minutes, let it cool off, and pour the top water into a glass bottle or glass bottles and stick them in your refrigerator. And then the bottom ginger precipitates, it settles down in the bottom, but it brings all the environmental pollutants with it. It's based on an old Indian ritual, which, to save time, I won't go into the ritual. But that is the water that I continue to recommend for my patient. We are very fortunate, those of us who are in New York, because Manhattan water is very good. It has been tested by many, many people. It's an excellent drinking water. So I think people like us in New York have this advantage. But people who are living in smaller places and the water system is not very good, they can use ginger water. Now, the other things, there are things like to prevent yeast overgrowth and fermentation in the gut. Fermentation, again, is a process by which the food substances, primarily carbohydrates, sugars, grains, etc., they are broken down. This is something which I think your readers, your listeners will like. If you have certain units of food and you give it to people who are oxygen breathing beings, from that unit of food, let's say we are going to get 100 units of ATP, which is the energetic currency of the human body. If you give the same food to yeast or to flies or to fermenting microbes where there's no free oxygen and build up the acid, they will only take 3 units of energy out of it from the same food. So we lose 97% of energy when we are fermenting in our gut. So anybody who has abdominal bloating, anybody who misses sometimes bowel movement, anybody who has a heartburn, anybody who has a gastroesophageal reflux, which unfortunately is a large part of us American people.
I was going to say, you just described most of the population there.
Right, but what I'm saying, most of the population needs to learn these simple things so we can all coexist healthfully. I'm emphasizing and repeating the word because when I think about what I need to do for myself, those are the words. It's not that I want the virus to make it disappear. I know I can't do that, okay? Because you can't do that without destroying your environment habitat completely. You can't do that. You can't selectively destroy one form of life in the hope that you are going to create healthy environment for yourself. You will so chemicalize your environment. We did that. We did with DDT. We wanted to control some pests. And what did we do? We gave them DDT and an awful lot of people. When we wanted to destroy life in Vietnam, Agent Orange, at that time we were trying to defoliate the trees because we wanted to get to the animal. But when you defoliate the tree, you also destroy a lot of life. You destroy the entire ecosystem, right? So I think the main thing that I would leave in this message you give me the opportunity is that we should search for authentic knowledge. We should learn that the politicians are not a good source of health information. We should also learn, unfortunately, the news media, whose responsibility it should be to sort out whose information is good, what is their background. For example, this Chinese scientist, this woman scientist that I had the good fortune to catch her on television, and I listened closely. She was the one of those scientists who actually wet the hands, and she did the work, and she was describing how you take the genetic material of flu from one source and cut it up and then mix and blend and crossbreed the genetic material to create novel viruses. And now Chinese, there is an absolute proof. I actually read it in the journal Science. Okay, they're very high standards of journalism. That in a meeting sponsored by the chief of the National Virology Institute of Germany and Japan, the two countries that I really admire their scientists, Germany and Japan. They presented data with PowerPoint presentation that everybody was shocked, according to this reporter. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of novel flu outbreaks in China, which they never reported. The local Chinese know how to self-quarantine them. So they actually used one of the criteria that if 3,000 in the general public there was, general media, that there were 3,000 Chinese in a particular city who were self-quarantining. That to them was a clear indication that there's something real happening. Otherwise, they would not lock themselves in and go into quarantine. They said the number of those things which caused more than, let's say, 5,000 deaths, they had their precise number. I'm just rounding it off. And also the quarantine people that we did voluntary. This I was listening to, this I read that, and then I listened to that scientist, that woman scientist. And I know that those are the truths. So the Chinese are not going to desist from their evil plans of every now and then shipping a novel flu virus, coronavirus to us. We have, Richard, no alternative except at a national level to learn to live healthfully with these things. And I believe it is entirely possible. It is our own experience in our own work in New York. It is the experience of the guy who parks the car in her because his mom in Jamaica is his consultant herbologist. So there are so many things we can do to strengthen ourselves, okay, rather than keep talking about eradicating the virus, which I believe that if there was a way that you could chemically eradicate the virus, that habitat would be very dangerous for human beings.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this question. You mentioned the news media before, and I see various different virologists, I think they're virologists, they give different answers at different times. Why is that?
It is sloppiness, it is laziness. One legitimate answer to this question is, unfortunately, there are some people who think they can become experts of subjects without ever seeing patients who are suffering from the problems related to that subject. So, for example, if there is a doctor who has not seen, let's say, 300-400 patients with flu, that was the seasonal flu, now we have pandemic. So if somebody has seen 10, 15, 20 patients with this, he has some real experience. But then there are a lot of other people, they have no personal experience of this, okay? Yale University published a paper in Journal Nature. That caught my attention because that's one journal that I like and I read it. They took 313 patients and they called them moderate or severe COVID-19 disease. They were hospitalized. They undertook a study which should have been done a long time ago, and I'm glad that they did it. They called it longitudinal immunologic studies of patients with acute, severe COVID-19. When I saw that in Nature, the first thing which caught my attention was Yale University can get their papers published in New England Journal of Medicine, Journal of American Medical Association, or the Journal of Virology, where the doctors would read it, the medical professionals would read it, the drug companies would read it. Why would Yale Group go all the way to publish their article in Nature? My conclusion was, in the early parts of that study, the Yale Group would recognize that there's something terribly important, which is important for people all over the world. And it is a needed addition to our general body of information. And they knew that the readers of the journal Nature are of a different kind of readers. They are the people who are interested in new ground. They are interested not in this one disease or that one drug. They are a larger view of that. As I read that, two things caught my attention. One was that they reported very high levels of IgE antibodies. Well, I did a lot of research and I wrote a lot of papers about 40 years ago. We actually had the first assay for mold allergy diagnosis actually was developed in our laboratory, my colleagues and I, and we got our patents and we got our recognition for that. Okay. My point is this, that I knew an awful lot about allergy and how to diagnose it with laboratory tests, with different types of a test, and they asked me to work with FDA to get the federal FDA approval for that test. So I knew something about how we go about developing a test and getting it approved. So I saw that in that paper, Nature paper from Yale. I said, okay, so that means their patients were highly allergic people, a large portion of them. Then the next thing I see, they divided their test results, immune system, into three groups. That immune mechanism which identify the viruses, they go after viruses. That system which goes after other bacteria like, streptococcus, E. coli, stuff like that. And then there was the third group, which went on to the yeast. And what caught my attention was that the part of the immune system which recognized the yeast and respond. The word yeast and fungus and mold is the same thing. They are synonyms. Okay. And I said, now I have to read this article again, word by word, 2 or 3 times if necessary. I was curious because I didn't know anybody in Yale who is writing papers about herbs and spices. I don't know anybody in Yale who is publishing papers on probiotics. I don't know anybody at Yale who talks about castor oil or psyllium. All the things which are important to us in this field, the Yale people do not write papers about that. So I said, I should write my commentary and send it to Nature and ask them to publish it if they approve it. Next to, at the end of the Nature paper, Yale paper, that's exactly what happened. And if somebody wants a copy from that, from your viewers, they can send me a self-addressed envelope. The address, you can put that in or something.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I will send them the copy of that because I consider it very important. Nature allowed me to describe the details of our seed, feed, and weed program to restore the bowel health, the bowel flora. Okay. So that was to me a tribute also to the Nature that they took my paper, and I'm talking about all natural ways. Now, obviously, I can give them huge studies with tons of data that I took probiotics acidophilus, or I took probiotics, let's say from kefir, or I took it some brand of yogurt, etc. Because generally in the integrated medicine, we don't get government grants for millions and millions of dollars. But still, this should not be a cop-out for my colleagues in integrative medicine. I think with our persistence and our hard work, we can publish as many books and as many papers as we want to, including all the way in Nature, which really surprised me. When they started accepting my contribution and send me a letter of thank you from single editors, that was a very big break for me. But that came originally from my oxygen work in children with autism.
So, Dr. Ali, I want to interrupt you there because We're almost out of time, but let me ask you one very important question. What about these? Do you wear a mask yourself? Do you recommend
Yes, I
it to
do.
your patients?
Yes, I do. But
Uh,
I do it. I do it as a courtesy to my visitors and my patients. I don't believe that that mask is going to protect me. So what I said about my own flu fighters under my skin, billions of them, I trust them, but I don't trust the mask for that reason.
mhm.
But I think that masks are very important. Distancing is very important. But what I am saying, individuals, the things that I am talking about, they are going to help individuals a whole lot more. Mask is very helpful for the society. So I believe that we should support at a societal level, at a community level, let's say at organizational level, yes, mask should be used.
And thank you so much for your time. I have to wrap it up. We'll remind everybody to go to your website, which is at the bottom of the screen right now.
Richard, thank you. You are such a good friend. You're a wonderful friend. Thank you. Thank
And,
you for your friendship.
and thank you for all the good information, Dr. Ali. You take care.
Thank you.